Hello everybody, welcome to day 10 of virtual learning. This video is going up for Friday, March 27th, and it is the beginning of a new unit. I'm going to go over the assignments that I gave you for yesterday's lesson, and then I'll explain what you're going to do for today's lesson. The way I would start this class typically would be by asking you if you think these questions are true or false. 1 says the Earth is at the center of the universe. 2 says all life is made up of 4 elements: earth, water, air, and fire. 3 says your body has 2 types of blood. One goes to the heart, the other goes away from the heart. 4 says one way to cure illness is to get rid of bad blood through bloodletting. Okay. This is kind of a series of trick questions. These are all false. But these are all things that people believed for hundreds of years until there was a big change in the way people learned about life, learned about the world, something called the scientific revolution, which is what you should have read about yesterday. But the truth is the Earth is not at the center of the universe. There are many more than just 4 elements. Your body only has 1 type of blood. The same blood circulates throughout your body. There isn't a different type that goes to or from the heart. And bloodletting is something they used to do to try and cure illness. I think we saw this in a video once, where they would cut people open. Remember when they were trying to cure the plague and allow blood to drain? They thought if you get rid of bad blood, that would cure people. That doesn't help at all. If anything, it makes things worse. So all those statements were false. And people are going to start to change the way they're looking at the world during this period we call the scientific revolution. The beginning of Unit 4 starts with the scientific revolution. And this is all about how Europeans start to influence the larger world around them, the emergence of European influence. What we'll talk about today are some of these famous scientists and mathematicians, people like Nicholas Copernicus, Galileo, Johannes Kepler, Isaac Newton, and how these guys had ideas that changed the European worldview. We will also get into the time period called the Enlightenment and famous Enlightenment philosophers. You may have studied them in civics if you've already had that class. People like John Locke, Voltaire, Rousseau, a few others, how they changed the way people are thinking about politics and society. That you'll see a little bit of today when you do the activity that I have assigned, but we'll talk about that more next week too. So like I said, first thing I'll go over the activities that I had from yesterday, and then I will introduce what you're going to work on for today, day 10, which is the Atlas of World History activities, but it's not going to be through Active Classroom. I'm going to have you answer it on a separate document. At the end, I'll kind of look ahead to what I'll have you do next week. Okay, so you should have read this 1-page summary of the scientific revolution. I attached it as a PDF document, and then I think there were 8 questions that went with it. I'm going to go over all the answers now. If for some reason you didn't already get that done and submit it, you can watch this, you can get it completed, and still get credit. Okay, the first question says, until the mid-1500s, scientists agreed that this was at the unmoving center of the universe. The first blank should be the Earth. For years and years, everybody believed that the Earth was at the center of the universe. The ancient Greek astronomer, his name was Ptolemy, is how you say that, had come up with this theory in the 2nd century AD. So people had believed this for over 1,000 years. His theory was accepted because it seemed like common sense, and it went along with the church's views. And remember, the church was central to people's lives, especially during the medieval time period. The church was the authority in most people's lives and had so much control. This idea that the Earth was at the center of the universe is called the geocentric theory. Okay, so if you look in the diagram, this is what they used to believe. The Earth is in the middle, the moon revolves around the Earth, but so do all the planets and the sun and all the stars. The Earth is at the center of everything. Speaking of the church, what did they teach people? Well, they taught people that God had put Earth in the middle of the universe. So that's what people accepted. These ancient Greek philosophers also had that same belief. So this is what people all along thought. That's going to change though, because of this man in the picture here. It says in 1543, a man named Nicholas Copernicus published a book that said the sun was the center of the universe, not the Earth. He also wrote that the Earth was one of just several planets that revolved around the sun. Now, most scholars, most educated people at the time did not believe Copernicus's theory. At the time, all of their scientific knowledge was based on those ancient theories that came from people like Ptolemy or from famous Greek philosophers like Aristotle. So he comes up with this idea. He says, nope, everybody has been wrong. The Earth is not in the middle of the universe. It is the sun. That idea is called the heliocentric theory. So the old belief, the geocentric theory, is on the left here with the Earth in the middle. Copernicus is saying, no, it's the sun that's in the middle and everything revolves around it. Now we know that to be the truth, but at the time, it was not a popular belief. About 60 years after that, this wasn't one of the questions, but I want you to know this. You're supposed to know about Johannes Kepler. He's a Danish mathematician, Johannes Kepler, and he proved Copernicus was right using models and using mathematics. He also discovered the way the planets orbit, the way they revolve around the sun, is not in a circle, but it's in an oval-shaped ellipse. But he had proof, and still people are not necessarily believing him. Someone else that's going to run into some trouble here is Galileo. We talked about him back when we talked about the Renaissance, because a lot of this is happening during the later part of the Renaissance. What does he see through his telescope? Well, he sees a few things. Mountains on the moon, dark spots on the sun, and 4 moons around Jupiter. And he also sees that those moons going around Jupiter are revolving, just like Copernicus said that the Earth revolved around the sun. So he seems to have come up with more proof for Copernicus's theory, this heliocentric theory that says it's the sun in the middle, not the Earth, and all the planets revolve around the sun. Well, 5 asks, how did the church respond to Galileo's discoveries? Well, simply, the church was angry, and they're not going to treat him too nicely. We'll get to that with the next question. Why are they angry? Why are they going to be upset with him? Well, think about it. The church had been telling people for years and years, God put Earth in the middle of the universe and everything revolves around the Earth. We as people on planet Earth are the most important things in the universe. Everything revolves around us. Galileo is challenging that. The church doesn't want people to question its teachings. Think about it. The church has a lot of power as long as people believe what they say. If they're wrong about the Earth being in the middle, what else could they be wrong about? Maybe people will stop believing all the things the church says. So this is one of the reasons why they felt very threatened. If Galileo is teaching people the church is wrong, it threatens their authority. So they see him as a threat. And in 1633, Galileo was put on trial. Church officials told him, you have to take back what you said. You have to go back and say, I was wrong. Or, we're going to put you to death. So they're not fooling around. He agrees to say that he was wrong and that the Earth was the center of the universe. But the rumor has it, even though he took back what he said, when he was leaving court that day, under his breath, he said something like, and yet Earth does move. So even though he was forced to go back on what he had discovered to save his own life, he still held on to that belief. He was put under house arrest for the rest of his life and died that way. Scientists like Copernicus and Galileo are going to start a new way of scientific thinking, and other people will follow their example. Scholars like Sir Isaac Newton, who we'll talk about more in a second, Sir Francis Bacon, and a famous philosopher named René Descartes. They used a logical approach to solving problems. And by the early 1600s, scientists are using a process called the scientific method to study the natural world. You have probably used the scientific method in chemistry class or in science class when you look at a problem and you come up with a possible solution or a hypothesis, and then you use an experiment to test that, and then you look at your results and you see, did I solve my hypothesis, or if you retry it. All of those are steps in the scientific method, and that was being developed way back as a result of the scientific revolution. The last question I put on here is critical thinking. There's no right or wrong answer to this. It's asking your opinion. It says, what would you have done if you were Galileo? Would you have taken back what you said or stood by your discoveries? And I asked you to explain in a short paragraph, so make sure you give me 3 to 5 sentences. Now, I can't tell you what to think. Remember, he could have been put to death. So that might influence you. If I were Galileo, and even if I believed firmly in what I discovered, I might say, okay, I was wrong, just to save my own life. It depends how principled you are. Are you willing to die for your scientific discoveries? Some people would be. But you just have to explain if you would have done what he did, or if you would have stood by your beliefs, no matter what the consequences were. They mentioned Newton briefly here. I'm going to go over the assignment for the BrainPop video about Newton separately. But he's very, very important, and he's somebody who builds on the work of Copernicus and Kepler and Galileo in the 1680s. A genius man, he's English. He realizes, the legend has it, he sees an apple fall from a tree, and it gets him to study this idea of gravity. Is it the same force that pulls objects to Earth that keeps the planets in orbit around the sun? And he ended up proving that's true. He also made other advances or other observations about the laws of motion, developed ideas for mathematics to measure motion. So he's a very important leader during this scientific revolution. The BrainPop video will give you more details, and like I said, I'll go over that separately. But what's the long-term impact here? Well, with all of these discoveries, educated Europeans are no longer believing that God holds everything in order, that the universe is all kind of orchestrated or held in place by God. They start to let go of a lot of the superstitions they had about the way the world works. And they have to abandon or let go of these ancient views of the universe and maybe question a lot of things the church had always been teaching. Instead, now they're looking at physics and trying to use these new understandings that come from the scientific revolution. Okay? The assignment for today, the day this video is going up, is about the scientific revolution and the Enlightenment. And there are a couple pages from the Atlas of World History. I'm going to attach it as a PDF document, and then there are some questions that go with that that you're going to answer. Some of them are fill in the blank, some of them are a little bit lengthier. I didn't assign it in active classroom because what I wrote actually, I think, gets you more of the specific things you need to learn. Okay? That one I'll make sure I go over, and I'll have a review for you probably on Monday, day 11. Next week, after I review that with you guys, we'll get into some more things about the Enlightenment and those Enlightenment philosophers like Locke and Rousseau. And then we'll be getting to what they call Age of Revolutions. What is making countries all around the world start to fight to get rid of the leaders that are in power and declare themselves independent or set up some new form of government? So the United States is one example. Why did Americans decide to fight the British and become a country of their own? And then how is that going to inspire other people all around the world? And still to this day in some ways. So we'll talk about that next week. That's some fun stuff. If you listen to this all the way through, you probably already know, bad news, they've extended the school closings all the way until April 24th, and it may be beyond that. So, if you have been doing this work, thank you, and keep up with it, because it's the only way you guys are going to be able to get to learn what you need to know from now until then, at the soonest. All right? Please keep reaching out. If you need help, send me a message, send me an email. I'll be happy to get back to you. Have a great day.